Ah, that's good coffee. It's Ron Brown with Tech for Senior, where we help seniors understand technology and also help them find a great cup of coffee to drink. So today we're going to talk about coffee roasting. Yes, coffee roasting. And you're going to wonder why we're not talking about technology. Well, actually, we will be. We're going to talk about information and how you get your information today. Boy, has it changed a lot since I graduated from medicine in 1976 at the University of Alberta in Canada. So many of you know I'm an amateur barista. I enjoy coffee. I have a number of coffee machines. This one you're seeing is made by Rocket. It's from Milan, Italy. It's really flashy, and you'll see a Charge 6 on the top. I often use it as a backdrop in some of my videos. This is one of the coffee machines I have to create coffees that I really enjoy. Now, before we talk about roasting coffee, let me give a plug for coffee roasters. If you type in your Google search local coffee roasters, you will be amazed at the number of people who have this as a hobby and sell coffee that they've roasted. And you'll get some of the best coffee you have ever tasted. In our area here, which is pretty rural, we have about 5 people doing it. I know Bill James is interested in coffee. He's on our show. And when he did the search, he found not only was there a lot of coffee roasters in Oklahoma City, but he had someone right across the street he never even knew. So it is a plug. If you do have local coffee roasters, give them a try. You'll find some great coffee there. So the date this past year was August the 7th. It was a Monday. I was sitting there after the Tech for Seniors show watching a few YouTube videos. And you know how YouTube is. If you watch something in the coffee area, then they'll certainly show you other videos about that. And I started to listen to a video about roasting coffee at home by the Virtual Coffee Lab. I watched the video and got more interested in this. And I thought, I wonder if people roast coffee at home. I wonder if it's possible to do that. I had absolutely no idea about anything regarding roasting. So I was interested and wanted to look for more information. Now, I guess if I went back to 1976, before we had computers, before we had the internet, I guess I would go to the library and pull a book out and try and find something to do about roasting. I'd read a book about it. I might even find the names of some clubs that I could write away. Remember those letters we used to write and put a stamp on them right away and say, hey, can I be a member of your club? Or maybe there would be some in-person meetings in the area that I was in. Or maybe, remember magazines? Maybe they had a home coffee roasting magazine. Those would be sort of the types of things that I would do to get information about coffee roasting. But of course, with technology, internet, computers, and particularly YouTube now, I was able to answer all the questions that I wanted to know about coffee roasting in a very short time because I could easily watch and consume a lot of YouTube videos, which gave me the knowledge that I needed. And let me go through the questions that I had to answer. So what's the difference between 1976 and today? Well, back in 1976, it would have taken me a long time to get the information I needed. But today, particularly with YouTube, I was quickly able over the next month to watch a lot of videos and get a lot of really important information and know where the knowledge base was to do an assessment and decide, do I want to get into roasting? So here are the questions I wanted answered before I was going to embark on this hobby. The first was, is it common? Do people do this sort of thing? So I guess many of you have made wine, beer, and maybe some other things in your past. And you've had a lot of fun doing it. It's a hobby, and a lot of people do it. Well, I found out that there's a lot of people that roast coffee at home. It's a very popular thing to do. Well, that's news to me, but great news. Second thing is, I guess you need unroasted beans, right? You need beans that are what we call green beans, not roasted. Where would you possibly find them? I've never seen them in Costco or any of the grocery stores. Well, it just so happens it's very easy to find green beans. In fact, guess where you might find them easiest? Yes, you read my mind, Amazon. Yes, that's very easy. You can get a wide variety of beans sold on Amazon. Now, the next thing that I found out was, of course, in Western Canada, in Lacombe, Alberta, which is just south of where I graduated from, is actually a big Western Canada distributor for coffee called the Green Coffee Company. Now, in the United States, there's Sweet Maria's and a lot of large coffee distributors of green coffee, so you have a really big choice. In fact, green beans are just as easy to find as roasted ones. That's the fact now. All right, so then how do you actually roast coffee? Interesting. Let me just tell you that 70 countries around the world grow and produce coffee. That's a lot of coffee produced every year. But if you wanted to have a cup of coffee in different countries, all the way in which they make the coffee is different. For example, if you had an espresso in Milan, Italy, it would be different than a pour-over coffee that you might have in Chicago. That would be different than a Turkish coffee when visiting Turkey, or different than a coffee in Paris. So they're all made differently, and actually each country has their own way of making coffee. And behind me, you'll see a picture of my daughter in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, who on her first day at the school she's teaching at, they had a coffee ceremony, and the lady is actually roasting some coffee in a frying pan. And that is, folks, the most common way of roasting coffee in the world today is roasting it in a frying pan. Didn't know that, did you? The second way that is very common is in a popcorn popper. Yes, a popcorn, a hot air popcorn popper. In fact, Sweet Maria's has developed their own type of popcorn, hot air popcorn popper that you can purchase. And yes, it whirls around and pops just like popcorn. Of course, you can also you can roast coffee in your oven. And also you can roast coffee using an air fryer. Yes, an air fryer. Or if you have a convection oven on your counter. There is, of course, a whole industry devoted to making roasting machines, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. You can even do coffee roasting on your barbecue. And that was sort of interesting, and I looked into that before making my decision. So after a lot of review of the data, I decided to purchase a coffee roasting machine, a drum machine made by a company called Behmor, Behmor. Now, why did I choose this? Well, because this company's been around for about 15 years. They've sold millions of units all over the world. If you talk to anybody about coffee roasting, they all have had or do have a Behmor coffee roaster. The cost of these are around $600 Canadian. And one of the suppliers I deal with coffee equipment that I have, like that rocket machine, readily had these available and would quickly ship me one. So I decided to go with the Behmor. It's a home roaster. I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. It's a drum machine, and it has a heat source and heats it. And that's how I decided to start my hobby of roasting coffee. All right, let me dispel a couple of myths. First of all, green coffee beans. When you get these, and you'll see some in the background there, these are smaller beans that you would normally expect from ones you buy. Also, they don't smell like coffee. They smell sort of like a wet plant, like I guess maybe wheat or something like that. If you're walking through a wheat field and smell it, it smells like a plant rather than coffee bean. The other thing is that if you go to a coffee house, I'm sure you've been to some, and you walk in and, oh, there's that wonderful smell of coffee. you think that's so great. And they probably have a roaster there, and at certain times of the week, they would roast coffee, and you could go in there and you'd smell this great coffee. Well, that's not true at all. In fact, what you're smelling when you go in there is probably the brewing of the coffee that has been sitting around in their bins that they're selling. You can sometimes smell the smell of coffee at that time. But the actual roasting of the coffee, not so good a smell. It's more like an acrid smoke that it creates, and you don't get a great smell from the roasting part of it. So let me go through the phases of roasting coffee, which I thought you might find interesting. So I usually roast my coffee at about half a pound at a time. Now, the time that it takes to do a batch of roasting is around 12 minutes. So when I heat the machine up and put the coffee in the roaster, it's going to turn around as there's a heat source in there that heats the beans up. Now, the first 4 to 5 minutes when the green beans go in there, the heat source is going to be drying them out. Coffee inherently has moisture in it, so that first period of time is basically a drying reaction, and they go from green to yellow. Now, the second probably 4 minutes or so that occurs is when the beans go through a browning phase. And this is a development phase which actually creates the color, the brownness of the coffee, and also creates the taste as the enzymes inside the bean get cooked, right? It's the same as taking an onion and frying it on the stove and caramelizing it. You know, you get the Maillard reaction occurring. So this is sort of the same thing. We're browning it, and we're creating taste in that second phase where the bean is expanding as well. It's getting bigger, it's getting browner, and we're sort of making the coffee taste inside the bean. So the big thing about the roasting cycle, and you'll see it on the back here, the big thing about a roasting cycle is what we call first crack. And what is first crack? Well, that's after the browning phase. What happens is the beans get bigger and bigger and bigger, and all that water vapor inside has to be released, and they go pop. And it's exactly the same as first pop on your popcorn. That's right. It goes pop, 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 pop. And that's exactly what happens as the beans open up and all that moisture comes out of them. And that's first crack. And that's so important on your roasting cycle, and everything's timed as per first crack. Yes, there is a second crack. Now, the time frame between the first crack and the second crack is quick. It takes about 2 minutes to go between that first and second crack. If you like a lighter coffee, you like a fruitier coffee, then you would take that, you would stop the roast right after first crack. The longer you leave the bean in between first and second crack, the darker the roast. So what happens after the bean cracks in that 2 minutes? Well, the beans get drier and drier, and they become actually what we call exothermic. They actually give off heat. In the process before first crack, they're absorbing heat and getting hotter and expanding. But after they burst open, they start to give off heat. So you have to be careful of your temperature. And they essentially are drying out very quickly and becoming a dark roast. Now, there is actually a second crack, which usually occurs in about 2 minutes. And that is when the actual structure of the cells in the bean start to disintegrate because they're just dry and there's nothing left. And that's CO2 gas being giving off. And you can hear the sound of that is a tick, 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 tick. It's a little ticking sound. Tick, 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 like that. And that is second crack. So sometime between first and second crack, you'll probably want to stop the roast. There, of course, everybody wants to experiment further on and keep roasting after second crack. And oh boy, am I going to get a really nice dark roast. And you can do that to a very small degree because, of course, The beans now are very dry and very hot, and you stand chance of getting a fire in your roaster if you push the envelope too much. Then you want to take them off and cool them down right away, and you have your coffee. Well, not quite yet. You have to wait about 3 days for the coffee to what we call degas, and then you can have a great cup of coffee in 3 days. It's not like making wine where you gotta wait 6 months, or beer you gotta wait a year. You can drink your coffee at 3 days after you roast it, and wow, it tastes great. So what have I learned in my first 30 roasts? Well, the first thing is, when I started using my Be More machine in the house, all the fire detectors went off. It is a very smoky process, even though my machine has, it's like a catalytic converter that's supposed to burn off the smoke. It still is a lot of smoke in the house. So I quickly learned I'm going to have to do this outdoors. And that's why doing it on the barbecue was sort of interesting. One of the problems about using it in other equipment, such as an air fryer, is because of the acrid smoke that it gives off. You really don't want to be roasting roast beef in the same machine that you're roasting your coffee in, or vice versa. So the barbecue was an interesting one because, of course, it is outside. So I roast my coffee, of course, outside now, and that works out better. But the biggest problem I have, and this is a nice problem to have, but a big one that all coffee roasters have, is that I give samples away to all my friends and ask them what they think. They all say, "Ron, that's the best coffee I've ever tasted. Can you roast me a couple of pounds?" Well, this adds up, and now I'm roasting more and more and more. Although I'm having lots of fun, I'm going to have to say to my friends, look, this is enough. So thank you for listening to my little story on coffee roasting today. The real point I wanted to make is really how I obtained the information about roasting as compared to how I would have done it many years ago. Maybe there are magazines now, maybe there are books in the library, but basically I obtained all the information I need, and through YouTube and the connections I have there now. And it's an ongoing learning process, of which there are regular shows and programs coming out on YouTube that will further my knowledge in this very interesting hobby I have. So it's been a great day. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope you have a great cup of coffee. And until we see you again, it's Ron Brown with Tech for Senior. We sure appreciate that. Like and subscribe. Until we see you again, have a great day.